Hello everyone, I'm Connor and welcome to The Orbit. Today we're going to talk a little bit about computers. Some of you have asked me, just because I post on social media, about my computer projects, and it has been a bit of a journey. Just to clarify, I am not a code professional. I don't do this for money, I kind of just do it for fun. And at the end of the day, I don't even think I'm that good. But again, it's a scale. To people who don't know programming, I might seem super adept. Who knows? To my coding friends, I can tell you for certain, I'm just farting around. I started learning code because I just enjoy technology. I find it interesting. I like learning things, and code was just another thing to learn. I code creatively, so I make honestly dumb projects. When I think of things to make, I'm like, what is something that would be fun? I code creatively, and also hopefully just in these fun side projects, I can gain a better understanding of today's world, because the internet, code, it's everywhere. We're using it all the time, so why not? So what I'm going to do today is just go over my coding journey, and then at the end kind of talk about where I'm at now, and if you wanted to get started, the things you can do. In 2015, 2016, I was living in Portland, Oregon. It was a good time, but I was making maybe $1,200 a month, and $800 of that went directly to rent. I didn't have a lot of money. I was creative. I was able to make it work, but my friends that worked in tech were living much more comfortably, and I was balancing student loans. I realized that if I wanted to live more comfortably, learning code was probably a way to do it. The entry-level salary for code at the time was like $60,000 annually, and it seemed like an achievable goal. So I began roughly around that time. I started out with Code Academy. I don't know if any of you have used this. I haven't heard of it today. But in 2015, 2016, I tried to learn Ruby just because I'd heard of it. And the problem with Code Academy is that it was not actively maintained. There were a lot of bugs in the actual development environment. So I would run into exercises that I put in the right answer, but it didn't work. So I was getting very frustrated. I learned the basics of programming, but I couldn't really make anything. After that, I transitioned to Team Treehouse. Team Treehouse was a learn to code platform that was actually based in Portland, Oregon. And so for $25 a month, I was able to just take courses from professionals who would teach me how to make things. At the time, code boot camps were a couple $1,000s if you wanted to take one of those. And I also just couldn't get time off work. So $25 a month to take courses whenever I wanted seemed to make the most sense. On Treehouse, I learned the basics, which is CSS, HTML, and JavaScript. It was kind of just the baseline of if I wanted to make things and share them on the internet, here's what I needed to learn. Which brings me to a very important point. Choosing a programming language. We'll talk about this later in the video, but I chose JavaScript and ultimately stuck with it because it was the easiest way for me to rapidly build and share projects. Cheyenne's gonna walk through real quick. High five.
Woo!
Bread. Another reason I chose JavaScript is that it had a very active community. I saw on Twitter and also just around Portland that folks were pretty excited about using JavaScript for pretty much anything. If I could go back in time, I probably would have still chose JavaScript. And the reason was it just was so friendly. And I know it's not a perfect programming language, and I know that everyone has these code wars of what is the best programming language to learn. And ultimately, JavaScript fit my needs to creatively make things and share them. Speaking of community, my interest in JavaScript led me to some meetups in Portland. I was actually able to hang out with other folks who were making things. And one of these meetups was called Donut.js. Donut.js was a meetup where people would share their code projects. It was essentially show and tell. And there were free donuts and free LaCroix. There, I met a lot of people that were using code in creative ways, which was exciting for me because I didn't really see myself as like a startup-y. I guess I was kind of startup-y. I think it was exciting to see folks using code for their personal art projects. For example, there was one woman, she was a like bank software engineer by day, and then by night, she was working on a project that used PLU codes. She was in the grocery store and saw how there are like 4 or 5 digit numbers on the stickers of the produce that you buy. They're called PLU codes, and she showed us the database where they log all that information, and she experimented with how to manipulate and analyze that data. So basically, she was just playing with PLU code data for fun. And then another guy was creating the most dissonant music possible using JavaScript. He said, okay, here are the waves, and here are what makes dissonant sounds, and here's how to programmatically make those. And essentially, he invented this instrument that looked like a sunflower. And the purpose of it was to always find notes that did not match up with the notes that you were playing. There's something very beautiful about like seemingly useless things that people make that are just for their own personal enjoyment. So Donut.js kind of seared into me, oh, code can be fun. Then in 2017, I moved to Seattle. Different scene. Home, famously, of Amazon. Actually, I moved in with one of my friends who works at Amazon and makes a shitload of money. There's no better way to say it. Whereas I was, paying off my student loans, my friends that worked at Amazon paid off their student loans with their holiday bonus. It makes me upset. I was in a new city, learning code. Again, I was money motivated partly. And I was like, if I learn this, I can potentially solve some of my financial problems. I think it's important to note that my friend who worked at Amazon said, hey, if you want to learn like a marketable skill, learn Java. But I tried Java, and because it was so hard for me to set up the development environment and to like try things out with Java that were fun, I quickly stopped doing that and went back to JavaScript. You may have heard this hopefully is common knowledge, but Java and JavaScript are completely unrelated. In Seattle, looked for meetups, found Seattle JS. It was different from the JavaScript community that I was involved with in Portland because it was more like startup-y. It was people who wanted to work for, tech companies. I went there. It was a little bit strange for me, at least for me personally, because I guess of the different environment and goals, but I kept coming back because there was free food. Like, I would show up once a week to Seattle JS, and they would straight up just order sandwiches from a nearby deli, and as a newcomer to town, this was very helpful. Next up, I started using Glitch. Glitch is amazing. It's an online IDE, which stands for Integrated Development Environment. Basically, you have your code editor, you have a little screen showing you what you're making, and it provides you a lot of the resources and tools to make something and share it in an afternoon. Whereas like setting up code projects really depended on your ability to like know a little bit of how to set up an environment to make things, Glitch took out that layer of complexity and said, hey, all you need to do here is write code and we'll do the rest for you. So that was awesome. It made custom URLs for my projects. I was able to look at other people's code, and it has a really useful remix feature where if you see a project that someone else made that you like, you can hit remix and it'll make a copy of it for you to tinker with and like break and or improve. Ultimately, I think Glitch was one of the strongest tools to help me learn computer programming just because it made it tangible and real. It was also free. It's not free now. I think in this year they released a paid version. You can use Glitch for free, but I think it's slower. But at the time, it was entirely free. I made a ton of little projects on Glitch. I actually made a video about it, which you can look up. But the point is, it was super fun and sustained my interest in code. In 2019, I ended up going to XOXO Fest back in Portland. And XOXO Fest is an experimental festival for the intersection of the internet and art. So you have software engineers and artists and people who do a little bit of both. And going there, I learned so much about just like internet culture, just problems in web development, and saw not only people who like wrote the code to make platforms, but also the people who are using the platforms to create their own businesses. So it was just a very unique collection of people. And what I thought was the best was the spirit of like friendly creativity, which unfortunately I don't think is that common in the tech sphere. If anything, I expanded my network of like computer-minded folks who are also just very creative and just inclusive. And now I follow a bunch of the people I met on Twitter, and I'm part of the XOXO Slack channel where I can ask very specific questions about like things that I'm interested in, and also all of these other people that attended. Cut to the present day, 2020, Corona time. My interests have now moved a little bit, and the things I'm focusing on are different from just making like dumb web projects. Granted, they're like still sometimes silly, but they're in a different field. I don't know how to describe this, so I'm just gonna go. First and foremost, today I'm very interested in information security, or InfoSec, as they call it. The reason being is that a lot of us rely on the security of the internet, and not a lot of us know how that works. We're told that like privacy and security are super important, but we don't even know what to protect ourselves from or how people are breaking into our accounts and things. We may have like a base level understanding, but it's hard to protect yourself from like mass surveillance or targeted attacks when you don't know how people are doing it. I started watching like hacker YouTube. Live Overflow is by far my favorite because he's just like the most technical. I also started doing capture the flag challenges. And capture the flag it's not the like schoolyard game, but it's the same concept where you have a website or a file system and it is your job to like break into it and find the flag. And the purpose of them is like fun, it's kind of a puzzle, but also teaches you information security concepts because you are doing what like an attacker would do if they're trying to get into your computer stuff. Information security is a huge field, and part of it is cryptography. Cryptography is essentially just codes and ciphers taking information and making it unreadable unless you have, a specific key. So I'm doing this tutorial series called Crypto Pals with my friend Lito, and it just teaches you cryptography basics by leading you through, mock real world scenarios. Along with information security, I'm also getting into hardware programming, and I have some props to show you. I had this is an Arduino, which is a microcontroller, and I've had it for a very long time because I was like, this seems cool. This year, just because I've been at home all the time, I was like, okay, I have an extended amount of time, I might as well learn hardware programming. I've been doing Arduino and Raspberry Pi projects. Raspberry Pi is like another kind of microcontroller, but it's more of like a fully functioning computer unit. The purpose of all of this is that I can make things that don't just live on the internet, but like interact with the world. For example, like take the temperature and like post it to a Twitter bot somewhere, or I could press a button and it would order me paper towels. These kind of IoT projects are interesting to me, and also just in general, I think IoT, by the way, Internet of Things, generally also is a insecure and developing field. Like a lot of stuff that's connected to the internet needs to be super safe. because you don't want, for example, someone to like reroute your sewage if it's connected to the internet. So I've been doing that. I'm just going to show these off. This is my Arduino. I made a Wi-Fi controlled LED light. And then this was my Raspberry Pi that I turned into a Pi hole, which is just a DNS level ad blocker. It prevents ads from being even sent to your computer. I use it sometimes. And yeah, I'm just fiddling around and working on these, and it's a lot of fun. I feel like a mad scientist. So we went over my journey in learning computer programming, and I think it's worth talking about what I learned. One of the hardest things when you're getting started is choosing what programming language to learn. And the best way to like figure that out is to ask yourself, what do I want to make? Because if you want to do hardware programming, you're going to learn a different programming language than if you are building websites or if you're building apps for like your phone. Thinking about what you want to make is going to clarify a lot of what you need to learn, specifically with like a programming language. The way I'm thinking about it, just learning a programming language is kind of like just learning how Legos connect to each other, as opposed to like trying to build a bridge or a car with Legos. It's just way more tangible, and you learn like more applicable skills when you are prototyping a project. When you're asking yourself, where do I start? Think about what you want to make and look at what other people are making and what excites you, and then kind of venture in that direction to choose the language. Similarly, project-based learning is great. The reason is sometimes people get trapped in what's called tutorial hell, where you'll take all these tutorials, you'll learn all this stuff, but you don't know how to implement it. And just actively using what you're learning not only helps it stick more, but you understand like the why of the tools that you're using. You understand why is it built this way. When I first started learning computer programming, I wanted to use information from like Spotify. And I was like, should be pretty easy. But I realized, oh, I need to learn, how does JSON work? How do APIs work? How does authentication work? These are questions that are grounded in reality. And thus I know exactly like where they fit in this very complicated puzzle. Project-based learning also allows you to build out a portfolio. I've built a ton of kind of dumb projects, but I've finished them. And when I make new projects, I'm able to look at my old ones and use those as just examples of what to do and what not to do. I just think that if you're learning to code, tutorials can only take you so far, and doing projects instead is what's going to really hammer in the concepts and just make your learning useful. Project-based learning also encourages you to teach yourself how to teach yourself. And what I mean is that a lot of software development or software engineering is Googling. You encounter a problem that you've never seen before, and you have to figure out how to solve that by yourself. And this continuous learning is essential to creating any kind of like code project, because you're going to have to teach yourself and learn things as you're going. Like I talk to my friends who work at Amazon, they're like, yeah, honestly, software development, 80% of it is just Googling. And so once you get familiar with that, teaching yourself the phrases to look for, you're going to be doing already a lot better. It is also worth noting that programming is super hard. Code, at least for me, I find it incredibly difficult. So I get discouraged often. I make mistakes often. Recently, I was trying to do a project with my Raspberry Pi. I was fiddling for a long time and realized that the problem I was encountering was just from something completely unrelated, and it's frustrating. So I've determined that part of dealing with the difficulty of programming is finding ways to like get yourself out of a rut and also to stay inspired. I do that through friends. My friends who code, I like reach out to them and they usually can like help point me in the right direction. The problem with, computer science is it's a vast field, so they can't help with specific problems, but they can point me in the general direction. 2, I watch a lot of code YouTube, and code YouTube just like takes my stress level down because I see other people just encountering the same problems that I'm encountering, and I feel less alone. Also, code YouTube is just inspiring to watch. I'm like, oh, this is a really cool thing you're making. I want to make it too. 3rd, and possibly most important, take breaks. Take long walks. Just realizing when you need to step away from the computer is probably going to make you a better software engineer or web developer. Take long walks, take breaks. Now, the $1 million question, maybe not $1 million question, but like $60,000 question, is how do I get started? Ask yourself, what do I want to use code for? Learning code for the sake of code is fine, but you will have a better time if you have an idea of what you want to make. If you don't know what to make, look at what others are making. Go on Glitch and browse their projects. I suspect that at least one will inspire you, and you'll be like, wow, how did they make that? And you can just look, and then you can try yourself. Google and YouTube are your friends. Like, from personal experience, there is so much good educational free code content on YouTube that if you just like watch a couple videos, you're already like well on your way to like learning how to make something. So use Google, use YouTube, and just type in questions and start that self-teaching process. Similarly, there are a ton of resources available to you. A lot of them free, some of them cheap. Free Code Camp is great. It provides just a full course overview of just basic computer programming things. And if you didn't know where to start, you could just follow a course there. Treehouse, I used it. I love it. Haven't used it in a while, but I suspect it's like similar. It's just videos of people walking you through code projects. Glitch, obviously. Glitch is great. And Coding Train on YouTube is run by a guy, I think his name's Daniel Schiffman. Yep, Coding Train, Daniel Schiffman. He is just a goofy noodle of a man who is really excited about teaching code, and he has a ton of videos out. And if you just wanted to watch a video that isn't necessarily like dry, taught by someone who cares deeply about what he is doing, check out that channel. Lastly, try making a thing, even if you don't know a lick of code. And just trying and failing will clarify where you need to go next. My earliest project that I remember is I just wanted to make a voice program for my Amazon device to give me random movie plots. I didn't know how to do that at all, but I learned very quickly how to do some basic JavaScript functions and also how like Amazon voice services work. I'm refraining from saying her name because I'll wake her up, you know what I'm saying? Ultimately, try making a thing. I am of the camp that even though code is difficult, it is really rewarding and fun when you do it right. It can at times feel like you're pushing a boulder up a hill. My friends in code all talk about leaving code because it's generally like not very fun. The main reason, I think it's a valid reason that people get into this, is just for the money. And if money is why you're motivated to do this, power to you, make that bread. But if code is also just like interesting to you, play around. I think that's it. I think that's all I need to say about my code journey and potentially yours. If you have any questions, I like talking about this stuff. Email me or shout out to me on Twitter. And I will talk to you next time, perhaps about businessy things. Who knows? Yeah, that's it.